Within the social and cultural frameworks of a neighborhood, we remain encouraged to orient ourselves along restrictive binary coordinates. Local and foreign, native and non-native, permanent and transient, owner and renter, natural and artificial, central and peripheral, us and them. If cities are to become genuine sites of post-colonial engagement, then they must develop frameworks for dialogue and action that purposefully disturb these conditions. One method, which we are hoping to develop within the open set framework, is to pair observational, knowledge gathering, and traditional community building methods with ones that embrace the paradoxical, multidimensional, and disordered experiences of our shared urban life. In this way, we hope to produce a balance between rational scientific perspectives and irrational ethereal ones. The trajectory that I've helped to develop is over-elaborately titled Conversations with Anarchists, Birds, Aliens, Ghosts, and the People Next Door. It's a proposal for a series of artistic actions in the Bijlmer, which endeavor to expand the spectrum of engagement and communication to include the other in its widest, most eccentric definition. In this we count the illegal, the interstellar, the liminal, the artificial, the mythical, the ephemeral, the living and the dead, and also the living dead. It's to imagine that we are imbued with hypersensory capabilities, and the Bijlmer opens up into a cacophonous, hallucinatory landscape. As we traverse the neighborhood, we talk with local wildlife. We sense the rhythmic tremors of fiber optic cables underneath our feet. We observe centuries worth of ghosts loitering in the park. We hear the lost broadcasts of a teenager's pirate radio station. We travel forward in time and live simultaneously with the newest tenants of our old family apartment. Such narrative transgressions, be they dimensional, temporal, historical, or even biological, produce different kinds of critical analyses and allow for new perspectives on our circumstances. By acknowledging and foregrounding that which is anti-rational, supernatural, and cross-dimensional, the trajectory aims to help develop fantastical stories which challenge the linear progressive narratives of global capital and cities, or global cities and capital. Fantastical stories, far from being models of escapism, embody a resistance to hegemonic definitions of experience. And in this way, the energies of the trajectory should be considered as promoting new critical tools for citizen-based readings and writings of the urban legend. So these are four sequences from clockwise from top. John Sayles' incredible film Brother from Another Planet from 1984. Francis Ailey's Sometimes Something Leads to Nothing from 1997. Kidrak Tahimik's Filipino film The Perfume Nightmare from 1978, and Singing in the Rain from 1952. So my role is to help facilitate the production of these fantastical or unconventional narratives, and in turn we hope they'll yield novel perspectives on the unique social dynamics of this remarkable neighborhood. My own artistic practice is oriented towards developing methods which can help us disrupt hegemonic historiographies. I do this mainly by producing counter-narratives and dramatizations that draw from marginalized or neglected historical materials and then rematerialize them through installations, educational models, performances, and scripts. And these are a few works from the last 4 or 5 years. The narrative structures I employ draw heavily from the traditions of genre fictions, storytelling forms that are not officially blessed as being literary because they're either too popular, too sensationalist, or too trashy. These include horror and supernatural fiction, crime and detective novels, science and fantasy fiction, queer fiction, slave narratives, erotic and porn fiction, prison fiction, fan fiction, westerns, sword and sandal fiction, that's a great little subgenre, and any mashup of the above. What is most essential about considering these narrative forms is that they already embody an opposition to the real being a very tenuous, contested state at present. Genre fictions tend to purposely complicate the relations of our experience and reject exclusive or binary methods of representation. This approach to storytelling is central to my aspirations as an educator, and in the case of OpenSet as a curator, And in this capacity, it has allowed me to invite scholars and practitioners, two of whom I'm delighted will be speaking shortly, Nadia Christidi and Anton Katz, whose writings and works exemplify these quietly resistant, inclusive approaches to social and political narrativity. So what I thought might be valuable within the short time frame is to provide two historical case studies, basically bookends of the first half of the 20th century, which exemplify how genre fiction has served as a site for resistance, post-colonial perspectives, and social critique. And if time permits, I'll read a short passage and screen a series of clips. And these will provide a sadly totally insufficient introduction, but one which I hope will allow us to better consider the potentials of these minor storytelling forms. The first study I'd like to share with you is of a horror genre, which emerges towards the end of the 19th century, and which serves as a tether between colonial and post-colonial writings. That is to say that it initiates an indirect method of critical reflection on colonialism from within. The genre is described by Patrick Brentlinger as the Imperial Gothic, and is comprised mostly of short horror and adventure tales that centralize European characters in the last geographical explorations, mappings, and conquerings of the globe, and specifically Africa. Penned by writers or journalists embedded in the colonial project, these stories were surreptitiously addressing the consequences of colonial complicity. The majority of these stories involve the now classic trope, the witch doctor's curse. As Yvonne Chareau, professor of religion at Swarthmore College, describes, the witch doctor and their power, known in its most generic racialized form as voodoo, are metonyms for African-based religiosity, construed as an insurgent and illicit spiritual force and encoding a non-Christian metaphysical orientation. The story, as most of us know, goes like this. A European explorer or magistrate or soldier or industrialist or archaeologist traveling through an imaginary geography known as deepest, darkest Africa commits some violation. A trespassing, a vandalism, a theft, an affair with a local woman, acts which he, via the lens of colonialism, feels are within his entitlement. He incurs the wrath of a local witch doctor, who exposes him to a horrible curse, the result of which is agonizing mental and physical anguish and finally death. The story is recounted by a friend or associate of the dead man, who, though he saw it all unfold with his own eyes, still cannot believe that it really happened. First, it's vital that we recognize within the parameters of colonial writing that to supernaturalize the colonized is to dispossess them of any real power. It's to say that because they hold no genuine threat, i.e. no physical, political, or economic threat, their lone power lies in producing a crisis of morality or faith in the colonizer. The great fear of the colonizer at the height of imperialism was not necessarily that there would be an insurgency or a structural economic collapse, but that he would lose his soul, experience such a profound loss of epistemological confidence amid strange gods and alien faiths, that his acts of conquest and exploitation in the name of God, the Queen, whiteness, civilization, capital, etc., would come back to torment him. Nadia, 2 days ago, pointed me to the concept of the colonial boomerang effect as developed by Aimé Césaire, and I think it resonates completely in these kinds of stories. So one of the best, ickiest examples of the genre, alongside better-known works like Rudyard Kipling's The Mark of the Beast and H.G. Wells's Pollock and the Poor Old Man, is Edward Lucas White's Lukundu, originally written in 1907, in which a British explorer in a remote section of Africa humiliates and demeans a local sorcerer and is punished with a particularly nasty curse. Hundreds of sores erupt all over the explorer's body. As these develop, it slowly becomes clear that each sore is actually a sort of homunculus, a tiny African man emerging headfirst from within the explorer's flesh, tearing him apart from the inside. So I'll read a passage now. The swelling on his right breast had broken. Van Rieten aimed the center line of the light at it, and we saw it plainly. From his flesh, grown out of it, there protruded a head, such a head as the dried specimens Etchem had shown us, as if it were a miniature of the head of a Balunda fetish man. It was black, shining black as the blackest African skin. It rolled the whites of its wicked wee eyes and showed its microscopic teeth between lips repulsively negroid in their red fullness, even in so diminutive a face. It had crisp, fuzzy wool on its minikin skull. It turned malignantly from side to side and chittered incessantly in that inconceivable falsetto. Stone, who's the explorer who's cursed with this, babbled brokenly against its patter. I am past all help and all hurting, said Stone. This is my hour. The curse is not put on me, it grew out of me, like this horror here. Even now I go. In a moment he spoke again, addressing the Minikin. You speak all tongues? He asked quickly, and the merchant Minikin replied in sudden English. Yea, verily, all that you speak, putting out its microscopic tongue, writhing its lips and wagging its head from side to side. We could see the thready ribs on its exiguous flanks heave as if the thing breathed. Have you forgiven me? Stone asked in a muffled strangle. Not while the moss hangs from the cypresses, the head squeaked. Not while the stars shine on Lake Pontchartrain will we forgive. And then Stone, all with one motion, wrenched himself over on his side. The next instant he was dead. So the symbology is not subtle, and it's obviously racist, and it has nothing to say about colonial subjectivity. But it's considered one of the first stories to address the psychological consequences of colonialism on the colonizer, a condition described as colonial or imperial shame or anxiety. And although not exactly radical in its condemnation of imperialism, the shame and anxiety seeping through the bloodline of the explorer is catalytic. Shame, as Marx writes, can be a revolutionary sentiment, in that it is a kind of anger which is turned inward. And as the explorer on his deathbed says, the curse is not put on me, it grew out of me. Sorry, that was very heavy, but sort of an important kind of precedent to a lot. The other bookend, and this is a little bit lighter in tone, and there's of course an endless treasure trove of material in between these two, so forgive the broad strokes, is connected to forms of resistance to counter America's defining of its capitalist imperialism in relation to others. During the height of America's antipathy towards communism in the 1950s, in and around the McCarthy witch hunts, Hollywood's left-wing population went underground, into the lowbrow boroughs of pulp fiction. With many filmmakers being blacklisted or marginalized or imprisoned for their political affiliations, they turned to non-critical genres in order to produce critiques and denouncements of McCarthyism and the vilification of communism. Rendered through the popular mediums of science fiction, horror, and the Western, blacklisted and graylisted filmmakers and writers such as Stanley Kramer, Carl Foreman, Robert Wise, Don Siegel, Dalton Trumbo, and Gordon Douglas invoked, on the big screen to millions of viewers, in America awash in hypocrisy. I'll play sections from the trailers kind of all at once. It's pretty messy, in a kind of chorus of paranoia, and that will conclude my talk, okay?
Stop! You tell these fools I'm not crazy! Make them listen to me before it's too late! Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
They come from another world, spawned in the light years of space, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet, bringing a new dimension in terror to the giant super scope screen.
Whatever intelligence or instinct it is that can govern the forming of human flesh and blood out of thin air is fantastically powerful, beyond any comprehension.
A cursed, dreadful, malevolent thing was happening to those he loved.
Jack!
Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know.
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
From city to city, an incredible, hysterical panic spreads. As the unimaginable becomes real, the impossible becomes true.
Stop and listen! Stop and listen to me! Listen to me! They're not human! Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Hang me, I'll come back. I'll kill you, Will Kane. I swear it, I'll kill you.
A terror-stricken town left him to face 4 killers, single-handed, at high noon. With every swing of the pendulum, with every second, a man's life ticked away. Never have so few moments held such excitement.
Miller!
What kind of woman are you? How can you leave him like this? Does the sound of the guns frighten you that much?
We bring you this special radio television broadcast in order to give you the very latest information on an amazing phenomenon, the arrival of a space ship in Washington. The Army has taken every precaution to meet any emergency which may develop. Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I think something is happening.
I came here to give you these facts. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
But he's a robot. Without you, what could he do?
There's no limit to what he could do. He could destroy the Earth.
All vehicles, close in. Let's go.
Every one of you watching this screen, look out. Because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater. Two teenagers see it first, like a falling star from outer space.
Boy, that was close. Hey, come on. I want to see if I can find it.
An old man finds it, touches it, and this is the shocking result. From then on, there's no stopping the blob as it spreads from town to town. It's indestructible. It's indescribable. Nothing can stop it.
This town is in danger.
How can it be stopped? Mob hysteria sweeps one city. Before long, the nation, and then the world could fall before the blood-curdling threat of the Blob.
Starring Steve McQueen and a cast of exciting young people.
Step aside, Reverend.
Dan Ballard sought sanctuary in this church.
What sanctuary was there for those men that Ballard murdered? Come on.
We're going in.
Yes, it came from outer space to fill the world with terror, to bring you unforgettable suspense. What was it? Where did it come from? Who were the all-powerful creatures it brought from outer space? And what did they want on Earth? You can learn the amazing answer only when you see the most thrilling picture in years. It came from outer space. In the astonishing realism of 3 dimension, with objects coming right out of the screen, so real they almost touch you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Noam.